Last week was rough, no way to sugarcoat it. The picks didn't hit, the energy felt flat, and honestly, it was one of those weekends where nothing seemed to go the way it should have. But you know what? That happens. The key is to shake it off and move forward. And that's exactly what we're doing here. New week, fresh slate, and this time we're making it count. And speaking of fresh starts, how about this brand new studio? The lights, the setup, the sound, it all feels right. It's a reminder that even after a tough stretch, there's always a chance to reset, refocus, and bring the energy back stronger than ever. So buckle up because I'm ready to dive into this week's action, and I'm telling you right now, we are bouncing back. Now, let's talk about the numbers from last weekend, because we have to face them head on. 2 wins, 7 losses. That's the cold, hard truth. It started promising enough, with the first couple of picks hitting, and for a brief moment, it looked like the momentum was there. But then the wheels came off, and by the end of Sunday, it felt like everything had slipped through the cracks. That kind of record is unacceptable, and it's not something I'm willing to tolerate moving forward. But here's the difference between sulking about the past and taking control of the future. I'm already guaranteeing this week is going to be different. This week, the approach is sharper, the picks are stronger, and if somehow I don't deliver, then next week, every single pick is free. That's how much I believe in turning this around right now. What's interesting about Week 2 of the NFL season is the unique rhythm it carries. Week 1 is always filled with nerves, unpredictability, and sloppy execution. Teams are still figuring themselves out, quarterbacks are shaking off rust, and defenses are going full throttle because they've had months to prepare for that opener. But by Week 2, the tables shift. Defenses are worn down after their first taste of real game action. Bodies ache, soreness sets in, and suddenly the advantage swings to the offense. The timing is sharper, the play calling gets more creative, and the scoring tends to ramp up. That's why I absolutely love overs in this particular week. The idea isn't just a gut feeling either. You can hear it from players and coaches. Guys like Chris Long have talked about how brutal that first real game feels on the body. So if there's a moment to trust the points to flow, it's right here in Week 2. But I'll be real with you. I tried to dig up some historical data to back that theory, and it was tough to find. The numbers from last week leaned heavy toward the under, with defenses looking sharper and favorites taking care of business. So even if my instinct says overs are the play this week, we still need to be careful and balance the board. That's why I've lined up 8 plays for this slate, and they're a mix of spreads, totals, and one prop I'm feeling confident about. It's not about chasing something wild. It's about hitting the reset button and building consistency again. Let's start in Dallas, because the Cowboys have a chance to make a real statement against the Giants. Dallas is laying 4.5, and when you dig into the matchup, the trends are impossible to ignore. Dak Prescott has completely owned New York over the years. 13 straight wins against the Giants as a starter, with 11 of those victories coming by at least 5 points. Not only that, but Dallas has consistently put up big numbers in those games, scoring over 30 points in the majority of them. Add in the fact that the Cowboys are coming off extra rest after that Thursday night opener, and this just feels like a spot where everything lines up in their favor. The Giants, meanwhile, don't look like a team capable of keeping up offensively. For me, this isn't just about trusting Dallas. It's also about fading New York until they prove they can score with any consistency. Cowboys -4.5 feels like the right side to kick things off. Next up, let's talk about Cincinnati. The Bengals are 3.5-point favorites, and I know people are hesitant after watching them stumble out of the gate again. But here's the thing. The Bengals always start slow. It's become part of their DNA at this point. Joe Burrow even joked about it after last week, saying they're already ahead of where they were a year ago. And honestly, he's right. They lost their opener, sure, but it wasn't the kind of disaster that makes you think something is fundamentally wrong. They left points on the field, they looked rusty, and now it's time for the bounce back. Meanwhile, Jacksonville is getting way too much credit for their win. I'm not sold on the Jaguars yet. This is one of those classic overreaction spots where the public sees Cincinnati struggle and Jacksonville shine. But the reality is the Bengals are still the better team. Laying 3.5 here feels like buying low before they get rolling again. Now, for a total, and This one might not be pretty, but it's got potential. Patriots versus Dolphins, over 43.5. At first, I was tempted to grab New England with the points, but what stands out to me is the potential for both defenses to struggle. Miami looks like a team in turmoil already. If there's any spark left in that offense under Mike McDaniel, this is the week he needs to show it. On the other side, the Patriots may not be loaded with weapons, but they've shown flashes of being able to move the ball against defenses that aren't elite. Put those two factors together, and suddenly you've got a recipe for points. It's not about these teams being great. It's about them being flawed enough defensively to give up yards and touchdowns. That's why I like the over in what could be a sneaky fun game. Then we turn to Detroit. The Lions are laying 6.5 against the Bears, and while that number feels big at first glance, there are plenty of reasons to back it. Detroit is a team that thrives when coming off a loss. They're tough, they're resilient, and under Dan Campbell, they've shown a knack for responding after setbacks. Meanwhile, the Bears looked absolutely lost in their second-half collapse last week. Shorter rest, brutal performance, and now they have to go on the road against a Detroit team eager to bounce back. That's a tough spot for Chicago. The sharp money agrees, too, with a massive percentage of the dollars backing the Lions, even if the overall bet count is small. That tells you the professional C value here. Plus, we've got to remember that last week's loss came outdoors at Lambeau, where Jared Goff and that offense historically don't perform at their best. Back inside at home, this offense should get rolling again. I like Detroit to cover and make a statement here. We've got more to cover, but already you can see the theme building for Week 2. This is about taking advantage of overreactions, trusting proven trends, and recognizing where teams are poised to bounce back. Dallas has the matchup history. Cincinnati has the talent and motivation. New England and Miami have the defensive flaws, and Detroit has the resilience to respond. That's the foundation for this week's slate, and it's exactly where the turnaround begins. When you look at the middle of this week's slate, one matchup jumps out as a classic overreaction spot. I'm talking about Denver going on the road as a small favorite against Indianapolis. At first glance, people will immediately say the Colts just dominated in Week 1, while Denver barely survived. That line alone will make the public want to hammer the home team. But this is exactly the kind of setup where you have to slow down and think about what really happened. The Colts look fantastic because they played a Dolphins team that seemed disorganized, unprepared, and frankly lost. That result says more about Miami's struggles than it does about Indianapolis being some hidden powerhouse. On the other hand, Denver played about as poorly as they possibly could and still nearly pulled it out. They've got the defense, they've got the weapons, and it's not realistic to think they'll look that flat 2 weeks in a row. That's why I'm siding with Denver -1.5. It's not about chasing last week's headlines. It's about predicting the adjustment that's coming when reality settles in. And speaking of spots where perception is louder than reality, let's talk about Atlanta heading to Minnesota. The Falcons are 3.5-point underdogs, and at first it seems easy to take the Vikings after their big win. But the numbers behind the bets tell a very different story. Despite only about a fifth of the tickets being on Atlanta, a huge portion of the actual money is backing them. That's sharp action, and it's worth paying attention to. The truth is Atlanta hung in there against a tough Buccaneers team and nearly forced overtime. They showed enough grit to prove they're not pushovers, especially on the defensive side. Minnesota, on the other hand, is being celebrated for a win that might not look as shiny once we see more of their young quarterback under pressure. Short week, growing pains, and a defense that's still unproven. It all lines up for Atlanta to keep this one close and maybe even steal the win outright. This is the kind of play where the public will scratch their heads, but the sharper side will nod and say it makes sense. Now let's swing over to Buffalo, taking on New York in a divisional clash. The line for this one is sitting with a total of 46.5, and I like the over. Buffalo's offense showed in that second half last week that once they find their rhythm, they can pile up points in a hurry. Josh Allen and company are too talented to stay quiet for long stretches. The concern comes on the defensive side, where there are still lingering questions about health and depth. They looked worn out after that physical battle with Baltimore, and when a team eases off in practice midweek, bodies are sore. That opens the door for New York to put some points on the board, especially with their run game that can grind down defenses. And this isn't the same old Jets team, either. With a new coach and new quarterback, the vibe is completely different, and they'll be fired up to prove they can hang with one of the AFC's best. Both offenses have enough firepower, and both defenses have enough issues to make this feel like a game where the scoreboard will light up. That's why I'm riding with the over in what could end up being one of the most entertaining matchups of the week. To round out the card, I've got a player prop that feels like a reliable piece to lean on. Khalil Shakir over 45.5 receiving yards is where I'm planting the flag. With all the attention going toward Keon Coleman and the possibility of him drawing heavy coverage from Sauce Gardner, the opportunity is there for Shakir to thrive underneath. Shorter routes, quick throws, and plenty of chances to rack up yards after the catch. It's the kind of situation where the matchup dictates the production. Shakir doesn't need to have a monster game to clear this number. A handful of well-timed grabs should do it, and the way this offense is built, those chances will be there. It's a play that might not sound flashy, but it's grounded in logic and matchup dynamics, which is exactly what we need to balance out the card. So when you look at the full slate, what you see is a mix that reflects the reality of Week 2. It's not about chasing last week's headlines or falling into the trap of believing teams are locked into their identities after just one game. It's about spotting where the lines are inflated, where fatigue is creeping in, and where the sharp side of the action is pointing. Dallas is set up perfectly against the Giants. Cincinnati is in bounce-back mode against Jacksonville. New England and Miami are primed to give us points. Detroit has the hunger to respond at home. Denver is undervalued after a sloppy showing. Atlanta is sneaky against an overhyped Vikings squad. Buffalo and New York have the ingredients for a shootout, and Shakir has a matchup that quietly favors him. Each one tells a story, and together they make up a card that feels balanced, aggressive in the right spots, and cautious where it needs to be. The important part here is confidence, not recklessness. Last week was ugly, no way around it, but the worst thing you can do after a losing stretch is to start throwing darts without thought. This week's slate isn't about hope, it's about calculated belief. The overs make sense because of how the league trends after defenses get battered. The favorites were siding with are grounded in historical dominance or bounce-back narratives that repeat year after year. The underdog plays are supported by sharp money and situational advantages. And the prop ties it together with a smart angle that exploits coverage matchups. This isn't a scramble, it's a plan. And when you've got a plan you believe in, the confidence returns. That's why I'm not just saying we'll bounce back, I'm guaranteeing it. This week feels like the one where the tide turns. Before we dive back in, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us keep delivering the latest Buffalo Bills updates straight to your screen. And hey, don't hold back. Let us know your thoughts on today's news down in the comments. Breaking news is buzzing across the NFL world, and fans of the Buffalo Bills might need to sit down for this one. Sources suggest that the Bills have reportedly reached an agreement with wide receiver Xavier Worthy, a move that could redefine the team's offensive identity. While nothing is officially confirmed, whispers from insiders indicate a 4-year deal could be in the works, and if it comes to fruition, Buffalo might just assemble the fastest offense the league has ever seen. Worthy, known for his blazing speed and game-changing explosiveness, would immediately inject a new level of dynamism into a Bills passing attack already feared across the AFC. Imagine a lineup where Josh Allen has multiple weapons capable of stretching defenses to their absolute limit. Now add Worthy to the mix, and suddenly every coverage scheme becomes a high-wire act for opponents. The rumor mill has gone into overdrive, with pundits speculating that this could force rival defenses into a perpetual state of panic. Fans are already fantasizing about highlight reels, deep sideline bombs, jet sweeps, and the kind of separation only elite speedsters can generate. Worthy's ability to turn routine plays into instant home runs could perfectly complement Allen's strong arm and quick decision-making. Meanwhile, social media has exploded with reactions, ranging from sheer disbelief to outright celebration, as Bills Kingdom imagines a team that could redefine what fastest offense really means. Of course, questions linger. How will Worthy adjust to a more complex NFL playbook? Can he handle the physicality of the league while maintaining his electric pace? And how will this impact the Bills' draft and free agency strategies in the coming years? For now, though, the mere possibility of this acquisition has sent shockwaves through the NFL landscape. If true, Buffalo could enter the 2025 season not just as a Super Bowl contender, but as a team with a level of speed that might leave opponents dizzy and fans absolutely ecstatic. That's a wrap for now. If you enjoyed the video and want to stay on top of all things Buffalo Bills, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. We'd love to hear what you think in the comments. See you in the next update.